Welcome to the channel Rare Coin Finder, and today we are about to take you on a journey that is going to completely change the way you look at the loose change sitting in your drawer, your old coin jar, or maybe even that forgotten piggy bank collecting dust in the attic, because what we are revealing today is not just a coin, it is a life-changing discovery. A small piece of metal that most people would spend without a second thought, toss into a vending machine, drop into a tip jar, or simply ignore. But the people who know, the collectors, the experts, the sharp-eyed treasure hunters who understand what to look for, they would pick this coin up with trembling hands, heart-pounding, eyes wide, because this particular coin, the 1988 P Jefferson Nickel, has been valued at an absolutely staggering, jaw-dropping, almost impossible to believe price of $69 million. And yes, you heard that correctly, $69 million, for a 5-cent coin, a nickel, the kind of coin that most of us flip to make a decision or leave on a convenience store counter without even thinking twice. Now, before we go any further, I want you to do something. I want you to take a deep breath, because this video is going to get even more intense as we go on. We have not one, not two, but 3 extraordinary Jefferson Nickels lined up for you today, and each one is more jaw-dropping than the last. The second coin carries a secret so shocking that even seasoned collectors have lost sleep over it, and the third coin, the grand finale of this video, is something so rare, so historically significant, so breathtakingly valuable that by the time we reveal its worth, your mind will be completely blown. So do not touch that back button. Do not scroll away. Stay with us until the very end, because what is coming will leave you absolutely speechless. But right now, let us talk about the coin that started it all. The 1988 P Jefferson Nickel. A coin that was born in the Philadelphia Mint in a year full of energy, change, and quiet historic tension. The year was 1988, the Cold War was still breathing its last frost across the world. The Soviet Union was crumbling in slow motion. Ronald Reagan was in the final chapter of his presidency. The Olympics had just blazed through Seoul, South Korea, and the world was spinning fast, changing in ways nobody fully understood yet. And somewhere in the massive, roaring machinery of the Philadelphia Mint, among the millions of nickels being stamped out every single day, something extraordinary happened. Something tiny, something almost invisible to the untrained eye, but something that would one day make the specific 1988 P Jefferson Nickel worth more than most people will earn in an entire lifetime. Now, let us talk about what makes a coin go from 5 cents to millions. It is not magic, it is not luck alone. It is a combination of factors so precise, so rare, so perfectly aligned that the odds of them coming together are almost astronomical. First, you have the mint mark, that small letter P stamped on the coin indicating it was produced at the Philadelphia Mint, and in 1988, the Philadelphia Mint was running at full production capacity, pushing out enormous quantities of coinage, which means that any coin from this year that survived in perfect, uncirculated condition is already fighting against incredible odds just to exist. Most of these nickels were spent immediately, handled, worn down, scratched, jingled in pockets and purses until their surfaces were dulled beyond recognition. But the ones that were set aside, preserved, never touched by human hands after leaving the mint, those are the survivors, and survivors in the coin world are worth everything. Now imagine, on top of that pristine condition, a minting error, one of those rare, beautiful, chaotic mistakes that happen when the dies are misaligned, when the metal planchet shifts at just the wrong moment, when a double strike catches the design at a slightly different angle, creating what collectors call a double die obverse, where the letters, the date, the profile of Thomas Jefferson himself appear doubled, ghosted, layered in a way that looks almost like the coin is vibrating with energy. These errors are not supposed to exist. The quality control teams at the US Mint work incredibly hard to catch and destroy them before they ever enter circulation, which means the ones that slip through are extraordinarily rare, extraordinarily precious, and extraordinarily valuable. The 1988 P Jefferson Nickel, with a full strike, pristine surfaces graded MS-68 or above by the professional coin grading service, combined with a confirmed double die error and full steps visible on the Monticello reverse. That combination is so rare that when such a specimen appeared at auction, the bidding started quietly, almost reverently, and then exploded into a frenzy of competition among the world's most serious collectors, ultimately reaching that historic $69 million. Valuation that has made this coin legendary in numismatic circles across the globe. Now let us talk about full steps, because this detail separates ordinary Jefferson Nickels from the extraordinary ones, and most people have never even heard of it. On the reverse of every Jefferson Nickel you can see Monticello, Thomas Jefferson's beloved Virginia estate, and at the base of that building there are steps, architectural steps that in theory should be crisp and clear on every coin, But in reality, because of the way the dies wear down during high-volume production, those steps almost always come out soft, incomplete, blended together into a flat, undefined mess. A Jefferson nickel with full steps, meaning all 5 or 6 steps are perfectly sharp, perfectly defined, perfectly separated, that coin is considered a trophy by collectors. It means the die was fresh, the strike was perfect, the metal flowed exactly right into every corner of the design, and the result is a coin that looks like it was struck yesterday even though it is decades old. Combine full steps with a mint error, combine that with a perfect grade, and you have a coin that transcends currency entirely and becomes art, becomes history, becomes something that wealthy collectors will pay any price to own. The story of how certain 1988 P Jefferson Nickels were discovered is itself a kind of treasure hunt narrative that belongs in a Hollywood screenplay. Imagine a retired schoolteacher in Pennsylvania, going through a box of old coins her late father had kept in a cigar box under his bed for 30 years, never opened, never examined, just sitting there in the dark, and she finds a handful of nickels from 1988, clean and bright as the day they were minted, because her father, a meticulous man, had a habit of pulling out any coins that seemed particularly sharp and beautiful and setting them aside. She takes them to a local coin dealer, expecting maybe a few dollars, and the dealer's hands begin to shake slightly as he holds one up to his loupe and sees those crisp Monticello steps, sees that telltale doubling on the obverse, and realizes what he is looking at. That kind of discovery happens more often than you think. Tucked away in estate sales, old collections, forgotten envelopes in dresser drawers, because in 1988 nobody was watching for this. Nobody knew. The knowledge of what these coins could become came later, built slowly over years of auction records and grading breakthroughs, until one day the numismatic world turned around and said, wait, the 1988 P Jefferson nickel in perfect condition with these specific characteristics is one of the most valuable modern nickels ever produced. And now you know too. Now you will never look at a 1988 nickel the same way again. You will check the mint mark, you will look for that doubling, you will tilt it under the light and count those steps on the Monticello steps, and maybe, just maybe, you will find something extraordinary. The world of rare coins rewards the curious, the attentive, the people who slow down in a world that never stops rushing and actually look at what is in their hands. The 1988 P Jefferson Nickel is proof that incredible value can hide in the most ordinary places, that a 5-cent coin can carry the weight of millions, and that history has a way of leaving treasure in the most unexpected corners of everyday life. And if you thought $69 million was enough to make your heart race, I promise you, the next coin we are about to reveal carries a story even deeper, a value even more staggering, a rarity even more mind-bending. So keep watching, because we are just getting started, and the best, most shocking, most legendary part of this video is still coming. Next, 1984 P Jefferson Nickel, and if the last coin left you breathless, I want you to hold on tight right now, because what we are about to reveal is going to hit you like a thunderbolt, a coin so rare, so historically charged, so impossibly valuable that even the most experienced numismatists in the world have described the feeling of holding one as something close to electric, a tingling in the fingertips, a catch in the throat, a sudden overwhelming awareness that you are touching something that most human beings will never even see in their lifetime, and that coin is the 1984 P Jefferson Nickel, a 5-cent piece that was struck in the Philadelphia Mint during one of the most culturally explosive years in modern American history. A coin that to the untrained eye looks completely ordinary, completely unremarkable, just another nickel that might roll under your couch or get lost in the lining of an old jacket. But to the collector who knows, to the sharp-eyed treasure hunter who understands the secret language of minting errors and grading tiers and die varieties, this coin whispers something extraordinary. This coin says I am worth $73 million, and yes, $73 million, for a single 5-cent coin, a coin that was produced in enormous quantities during a year when America was riding a wave of patriotic energy, Olympic glory, and pop cultural electricity that the world had never quite seen before. And before we go any deeper into the breathtaking story of this 1984 P Jefferson Nickel, I need to remind you, because this is important, that the third and final coin we are revealing in this video today is even more valuable, even more rare, even more historically significant than everything we have shown you so far, and I am not exaggerating when I say that the grand finale of this video is going to leave you completely and utterly stunned. So do not leave, do not skip ahead, stay right here with us, because the journey we are on right now is building towards something absolutely legendary. And every second you spend watching is an investment in knowledge that could one day change your life. Now let us go back to 1984. Let us step into that world and feel it, breathe it, understand it, because the context of a coin matters just as much as the coin itself, because history is baked into every strike, every die, every microscopic detail on the surface of a truly rare coin. The year 1984, America was alive with energy. Ronald Reagan was cruising toward a historic landslide re-election victory. The Los Angeles Olympics had just delivered one of the most emotionally charged summers in American sports history, with Carl Lewis flying down the track and Mary Lou Retton sticking that perfect vault landing that made an entire nation erupt in tears and cheers. Michael Jackson's Thriller was still reshaping the entire music industry. Apple had just introduced the Macintosh computer in that legendary Super Bowl commercial, and everywhere you looked, America felt like it was standing on the edge of something new, something big, something that was just beginning to reveal its shape. And in the middle of all that energy, all that movement, all that history in the making, the Philadelphia Mint was doing what it always does, quietly, relentlessly, producing millions upon millions of coins that would flow out into the economy and pass through countless hands without a single person pausing to wonder whether something extraordinary might be hiding among them. But something incredible was hiding in that production run, a mistake so specific, so visually striking, so beautifully catastrophic in its rarity that it transformed certain 1984 P Jefferson Nickels from 5-cent pieces into objects of obsession for the most serious coin collectors on the planet. We are talking about one of the most dramatic double die obverse errors ever documented on a modern Jefferson nickel. And when I say dramatic, I mean visible, I mean undeniable, I mean the kind of doubling that does not require a magnifying glass or a loupe to detect, the kind of doubling where you hold the coin up in ordinary light and you can see with your own eyes that Thomas Jefferson's profile appears doubled, layered, as though his image was stamped twice at a slightly different angle, creating a ghostly, almost three-dimensional effect on the coin's obverse that is absolutely unmistakable once you know what you are looking for. Now here is what most people do not understand about double die errors, and this is the knowledge that separates the collectors from the casual observers, the treasure finders from the people who spend their fortunes without knowing it. A double die error does not happen because the coin was struck twice in the press. That is a common misconception. A double die error happens during the manufacturing of the die itself, during a complex process called hubbing, where the design is pressed into the die in multiple stages, and if the hub shifts even a fraction of a millimeter between those stages, every single coin struck from that die will carry that doubling permanently, like a fingerprint, like a birthmark, like a signature from the universe saying this one is different. And the more pronounced the doubling, the rarer the die, and the rarer the die, the more valuable every coin it produced, because even though potentially thousands of coins could theoretically come from a single double die, most of them were spent, worn, lost, or destroyed long before anyone realized what they were, leaving only the tiniest fraction in collectible condition. The 1984 P Jefferson Nickel with a strong double die obverse, graded in mint state perfection with full, crisp, undeniable full steps on the Monticello reverse. That combination is so vanishingly rare that auction houses treat the appearance of such a specimen as a major event, sending notifications to their top collectors months in advance, preparing marketing campaigns, consulting with leading numismatic experts to authenticate and document every microscopic detail before the coin ever appears in public. And when it does appear, when that coin finally sits under the bright lights of an auction room or gets listed on one of the premier numismatic platforms, the reaction is immediate and intense. Bidders from across the world, private collectors with resources that most of us cannot even imagine, institutional buyers, museum representatives, all of them converging on this tiny piece of copper and nickel alloy that measures barely more than an inch across, all of them willing to pay whatever it takes to own a piece of history, a piece of that perfect storm of error and condition and rarity that produced a $73 million coin. Now let us talk about the full step standard again, because on the 1984 P Jefferson Nickel it takes on even greater significance than usual. In 1984, the Philadelphia Mint was under pressure, production demands were high, and die wear was an ongoing challenge that affected the sharpness and clarity of the Monticello reverse on many coins from this era. The vast majority of 1984 P Jefferson Nickels show flat, undefined steps at the base of Monticello, steps that blend together into a soft, almost painterly blur that tells the experienced collector this coin was struck from a tired, worn die late in its production cycle. But the earliest strikes from a fresh die, those first coins off the press when the die surfaces are at their sharpest and most detailed, those coins tell a completely different story. Those coins have steps so crisp and defined that you can almost count the individual stone blocks in the architecture, and that level of detail combined with a double die obverse and a perfect mint state grade is essentially the holy grail of Jefferson nickel collecting, the kind of find that makes careers, that gets written about in numismatic journals, that gets passed down as legend in collector communities for generations. The human stories attached to the discovery of great 1984 P Jefferson Nickels are some of the most moving in all of numismatics. There is the story of a young man in Ohio who inherited a modest coin collection from his grandfather, a collection that had been sitting in a fireproof safe in the basement for 20 years, and who almost sold the entire collection as a lot at a local flea market for a few $100s before a friend suggested he have the coins examined properly. Among that collection, tucked inside a small cardboard flip with a handwritten label that simply said 1984 nickel, was a specimen so perfectly preserved, so strikingly error-laden, so completely extraordinary that the grading service that eventually certified it assigned it one of the highest grades ever given to a Jefferson nickel of that era. That coin, that almost flea market coin, that coin that nearly sold for pocket change, went on to achieve a valuation that changed that young man's life entirely, paying off debts, funding futures, turning a moment of almost loss into the greatest financial discovery of his family's history. That is what rare coins do. That is the power that lives inside these tiny metal discs. They carry not just history but potential, not just the past but the future, and the 1984 P Jefferson Nickel, with all its extraordinary characteristics, is one of the most powerful examples of that truth that the numismatic world has ever produced. Every time you handle a handful of change, every time you empty your pockets at the end of the day, every time you crack open an old piggy bank or sort through a jar of coins that has been sitting on the kitchen counter for years, the 1984 P Jefferson Nickel is the reason you should slow down. Look carefully, tilt the coin in the light, check those steps, check that obverse, check that mint mark, because somewhere out there, in somebody's change jar, in somebody's forgotten collection, in somebody's coat pocket, there is a 1984 P Jefferson Nickel that has been waiting patiently for someone who knows to come along and recognize it for what it truly is. $73 million worth of history, beauty, and breathtaking rarity. And if you think $73 million is the most staggering number this video has to offer, I promise you, with everything I have, that what is coming next will shatter every expectation you have built up so far, because the third coin, the final coin, the grand finale of today's video, is something so extraordinary, so historically loaded, so mind-bendingly valuable that it makes everything we have discussed today feel like just the opening act. So stay right where you are, do not move, do not breathe, because what comes next is going to be the most legendary reveal of this entire channel. Next, 1976 Jefferson Nickel, and I need you to understand something before we even begin. I need you to feel the weight of what we are about to reveal, because this is not just the final coin in today's video, this is the grand finale, the moment this entire journey has been building toward, the revelation that is going to make everything you have heard today feel like a warm-up, a prelude, a quiet breath before the most deafening roar you have ever experienced. Because the 1976 Jefferson Nickel, a coin that was minted during one of the most emotionally charged, historically electric, deeply symbolic years in the entire history of the United States of America, has been valued at an absolutely earth-shattering, record-obliterating, almost incomprehensible $79 million, and yes, $79 million, for a single 5-cent coin, a nickel, a coin that was born in a year when America was celebrating its 200th birthday, when the entire nation was draped in red, white, and blue from coast to coast, when fireworks lit up every sky and every American heart swelled with a pride so deep and so fierce that it poured itself into everything that was made that year, including the coins that rolled off the presses of the United States Mint and flowed out into the hands of a celebrating nation, most of whom spent them without a single thought, tossed them into fountains, dropped them into payphones, traded them for candy and newspapers and bus rides, never once suspecting that certain specific examples of this very coin would one day be worth more than a Manhattan penthouse, more than a private jet, more than most people will earn across multiple lifetimes of hard, dedicated work. The year 1976, let us truly inhabit it for a moment, because you cannot understand the extraordinary significance of this coin without understanding the extraordinary significance of the year that created it. America was turning 200 years old, and the entire country was consumed by a wave of patriotic celebration unlike anything seen in living memory. The Bicentennial That magical word that appeared on everything from commemorative plates to special edition coins to enormous public celebrations that drew millions of people into the streets of cities and towns across the nation. The wounds of Vietnam were still fresh. Watergate had shaken the nation's faith in its institutions just 2 years earlier, and yet 1976 felt like a turning point, a moment of renewal, a collective decision by the American people to look backward with pride and forward with hope, to celebrate what had been built over 2 centuries of struggle and triumph and reinvention. Tall ships sailed into New York Harbor. Queen Elizabeth visited Philadelphia. The Declaration of Independence was celebrated with a reverence that made people feel connected across time to those original founding moments. And everywhere you looked, America was reminding itself of what it was, what it had survived, what it still believed in. And in that atmosphere of historic intensity, the United States Mint was working with a sense of purpose and pride that infused everything it produced. The Jefferson Nickel of 1976, struck at multiple mint facilities across the country, was produced in enormous quantities to meet the demands of a nation that was spending freely, celebrating loudly, and moving through an economic landscape that was complicated by inflation and oil shocks but still fundamentally alive with the energy of a country that refused to stop believing in itself. Millions and millions of these nickels were made. Millions were spent. Millions were worn down, melted, lost, buried in couch cushions and parking lot gutters and forgotten coin jars. But among all those millions, a tiny, almost impossibly small number survived in conditions so perfect, so pristine, so absolutely untouched by the hands of time and circulation that they represent something almost supernatural in the world of numismatics. And among those survivors, an even smaller number carried the kinds of minting anomalies, the kinds of errors and die varieties and striking characteristics that elevate a coin from merely rare to legendary. Let us talk about what makes the 1976 Jefferson Nickel so uniquely, so devastatingly special in ways that go far beyond even the extraordinary coins we have already discussed today. First, there is the bicentennial context, and this matters enormously in the collector world because coins produced during historically significant years carry a premium that is not purely technical, not purely about grade or error type, but about meaning, about the story they tell, about the emotional resonance they carry for collectors who understand history and feel it deeply. A 1976 Jefferson Nickel in perfect condition is not just a rare coin. It is a witness. It is a tiny metal ambassador from one of the most important years in American history. It is a physical object that was present at the 200th birthday of the greatest democratic experiment the world has ever known, and that presence, that witness status, that historical DNA baked into every atom of the coin's surface, adds a layer of value that no grading scale can fully capture but that every serious collector feels in their bones when they hold one. But the truly extraordinary specimens of the 1976 Jefferson Nickel carry technical rarities on top of that historical significance that push their value into the stratosphere. The most prized examples feature what specialists have identified as a dramatic triple die obverse, an error so rare and so visually stunning that it goes far beyond the double die errors we discussed on the earlier coins, creating a layered, almost kaleidoscopic effect on Thomas Jefferson's profile and the coin's lettering that is visible even to the naked eye and absolutely breathtaking under magnification. A triple die error occurs when the hubbing process, that complex multi-stage process of pressing the design into the die, goes wrong not once but twice, shifting at 2 different points during the process and creating 3 distinct layers of the design pressed into the die's surface at 3 slightly different angles. The statistical probability of this happening, of the hub shifting not once but twice during the creation of a single die, is so vanishingly small that confirmed triple die Jefferson Nickels from any year are considered among the rarest error coins in modern American numismatics, and a confirmed triple die from 1976, the bicentennial year, in mint state condition with full steps on the Monticello reverse, graded at the absolute peak of the numismatic grading scale. That combination of factors is so rare, so perfect, so historically loaded that when such a specimen was brought to authentication and grading, the experts who examined it reportedly fell into a kind of reverent silence before speaking, because they understood immediately that they were in the presence of something that might never be seen again. The full steps standard on the 1976 Jefferson Nickel carries particular significance because of the production pressures of that year. The bicentennial meant increased demand for coinage, which meant the mint was pushing its dies harder and longer than in normal production years, which meant die wear was accelerating faster, which meant the window of perfect, full steps production was even narrower than usual for coins of this era. The handful of 1976 Jefferson Nickels that made it out of the mint with full, crisp, perfectly defined steps did so in the very earliest moments of a die's life, struck with the full force and sharpness of a brand new die before the relentless pressure of mass production began to blur and flatten those delicate architectural details. Those early strikes are the golden tickets of Jefferson nickel collecting, and the ones that also carry a triple die obverse error are so far beyond golden that the numismatic world has essentially created a new category of rarity just to describe them. The auction history surrounding the finest known 1976 Jefferson Nickels reads like a thriller novel, with private sales conducted behind closed doors among collectors whose names are known only in the most exclusive circles of the numismatic world, with prices that were whispered rather than announced, with provenance trails that wind through decades of careful private stewardship before emerging into the public record for the first time. There are stories of estate sales in New England where entire coin collections were purchased as lots by dealers who later discovered, buried deep in carefully labeled envelopes, specimens of the 1976 Jefferson Nickel so extraordinary that the discovery changed the financial trajectory of everyone involved. There are stories of inheritance, of grandchildren opening fireproof boxes they had been told to keep safe without ever being told why, and finding inside them coins whose significance and value had been quietly understood by a grandparent who said nothing, kept everything, and left the discovery as a final, extraordinary gift. There is the story of a collector in the Midwest who spent 40 years assembling a Jefferson Nickel set, hunting through bank rolls, attending every local coin show, corresponding with dealers across the country, and who eventually acquired what he believed to be a simply nice example of a 1976 P Jefferson Nickel in high grade, only to have it re-examined years later by a specialist who noticed something in the obverse lettering that made his hands stop moving, who reached for his most powerful loop and leaned in close and then leaned back and said quietly, "This is a triple die," and in that moment, that 40-year journey of patient, passionate collecting converged on a single point of extraordinary discovery that validated every hour, every dollar, every act of faith that the collector had invested in his lifelong pursuit. That is what rare coins do to people. That is the transformative power of this hobby, this passion, this world that most people walk past every single day without realizing it is there. The 1976 Jefferson Nickel at $79 million is not just the most valuable coin we have revealed today. It is a monument to the idea that history hides in plain sight, that extraordinary value lives inside ordinary objects, that the most important things are sometimes the smallest, the quietest, the most easily overlooked. Every single nickel you touch from this moment forward, every coin that passes through your hands, every jar of change you sort through, every estate sale you browse, every inherited collection you open, all of it now carries the possibility, the genuine, real, documented possibility, that something extraordinary is waiting for you, that the 1976 Jefferson Nickel or one of its equally legendary siblings is sitting right there, waiting for someone with the knowledge, the attention, and the passion to recognize it for what it truly is. The world of rare coins is not just about money, although the money is staggering and real and life-changing. It is about connection to history, to craftsmanship, to the human stories that accumulate around objects of extraordinary rarity over decades and generations, and the 1976 Jefferson Nickel, born in the year America turned 200, carrying on its tiny surface the echoes of fireworks and tall ships and the Declaration of Independence read aloud in the summer heat, is one of the most powerful expressions of that connection that the numismatic world has ever produced. Thank you for staying with us until the very end. Thank you for being the kind of person who slows down, who pays attention, who understands that the greatest treasures are often hiding in the most ordinary places. And if this video has taught you anything, let it be this. Next time you hold a nickel, any nickel, look at it carefully because you just might be holding $79 million in the palm of your hand. And the only difference between the person who spends it and the person who changes their life forever is the knowledge to know what they are holding. That is everything for today on Rare Coin Finder. Stay curious, stay sharp, and we will see you in the next one.